Okay, so in this particular question, we're given the stock solutions, three stock solutions, and we're told to make up or how much to take from these stock solutions and how much water to make it up with, and therefore we end up with 500 mils of this buffer. And part of this 500 mils will be the MOPS, the sodium acetate, as well as the EDTA. Okay, so let's work out for the MOPS first. Okay, so we start with, or we have 0.2 molar of something called MOPS. So this MOPS is a particular buffer, and we have a stock which is 0.2 molar of this. Now 0.2 molar can be written as 0.2 moles per liter, which can also be written as 0.2 millimoles per milliliter. Okay, which means that if we take out 1 milliliter from this stock, which is 0.2 molar, we're essentially taking out, in this 1 milliliter, we're taking out 0.2 millimoles of the MOPS. Now, we don't take out 1 milliliter, okay, we take out 50 milliliters. Okay, so if we say, well, if in every 1 milliliter there is 0.2 millimoles, well, in 50 milliliters there is how many millimoles? Well, to get from 1 down to 50, or up to 50 rather, we have to times by 50. Therefore, to get from here to here, we also times by 50. And so 0.2 times 50 is 10. And so this means that in the 50 mils, or 50 milliliters of the MOPS buffer you're taking out, in that 50 mils, there's floating around 10 millimoles of the MOPS itself. Okay, so we add this 50 mils into this final buffer solution, and so 50 mils sitting down here. So this is 50 mils, and in this 50 mils there's 10 millimoles of MOPS. Now for the next one, sodium acetate. Sodium acetate, we have a solution which is 100 millimolar. This is written out as, so let's write Na acetate. 100 millimoles per liter, which means it's 100 micromoles per milliliter. Okay, now this means again in 1 milliliter of the stock solution there will be 100 micromoles in 1 milliliter. Okay, but we don't take out 1 milliliter, we take out 25 milliliters. Therefore, in 25 milliliters, how many micromoles do we have? Well, 1 going to 25 means you times by 25, and 100 you also times by 25, which means this should be 2500, also known as 2500, and this is equivalent to 2.5 millimoles in 25 milliliters. Okay, so we have 25 milliliters here, and in that 25 milliliters there exists 2.5 millimoles of the sodium acetate. Now our last one, our EDTA, we have a 50 millimolar stock. This can be expanded out to be 50 millimoles per liter, or 50 micromoles per mil. Again, that's in 1 mil there's 50 micromoles, therefore in 10 mils there are 500 micromoles. Okay, so another 10 mils is over here, and in this 10 mils there's 500 micromoles of EDTA. Obviously these aren't to scale, and the rest of it you make up with water until the final volume is 500 milliliters, and you assume in this water there's nothing floating around, it's clean, there's no MOPS, no sodium acetate, no EDTA. Therefore in this final volume of 500 milliliters, okay, there's only this amount of MOPS, only this amount of sodium acetate, and only this amount of EDTA. Okay, so let's express that. Let's start with MOPS. Okay, so in the final solution, your concentration of MOPS will actually be 10 millimoles in the 500 milliliters. Okay, and this is equal to saying, well, let's take it up to 1000 milliliters, because that's 1 liter, it's nice and handy to work with. To go from 500 to 1000, you times by 2. Okay, times by 2. Therefore, to go from here to here, you also times by 2, and that is 20 millimoles. Now 20 millimoles per 1000 milliliters can be written as per liter. And now if you remember, big M is equivalent to mol/L, which means that 20 millimoles per liter can actually be written as 20 milli, and then the moles per liter bit becomes a big M, 20 millimolar. Okay, and then if we work it out for the sodium acetate, this will be 2.5 millimoles in 500 milliliters, which means we'll skip a few steps here. Double this to 1 liter, double this will be 5 millimoles, which means it can be written as 5 millimolar, and the concentration of EDTA will be 500 micromoles in 500 milliliters. Okay, this will be equal to 1000 micromoles in 1 liter. 1000 micromoles is the same as 1 millimole per liter, and therefore this can be written as 1 millimolar. Okay, so your final concentration is 20 over here, 5 over here, and 1 for the EDTA. So the next part of the question asks us how to describe these stock solutions in terms of this thing called the X factor, or the dilution factor. Okay, if we think about the instructions to add the various volumes of the stock to the final volume of 500, let's start with MOPS. Okay, so for MOPS it says add 50 milliliters, okay, into a total volume of 500 milliliters. This means, okay, 50 milliliters is a tenth of 500 milliliters, okay, tenth of 500 milliliters. Now this tenth thing is important, so 1 in 10. It means that one part, okay, one part of the final will be made up of the MOPS stock, and 9 parts of the final will be made up of something else. Okay, but the important thing is one part of these combined 10 parts is made up of your stock solution, of this particular stock solution, and 9 parts made up of other things. Okay, so because this is a tenth, okay, or 1 part in 10, we call this a 10x. A 10x stock. Okay, so it's 1 part in 10. Now the interesting thing is here we can actually use this X factor to double check our calculations here. We can say, well, the X factor is 10x, which means technically that this is 10 times more concentrated, okay, than the final will be. Okay, so 0.2 molar is 10 times more concentrated than final concentration. Okay, so this is the stock concentration, and it'll be 10 times more concentrated than the final concentration. So 0.2 molar is equal to 200 millimolar. Now if that's 10 times more concentrated, then the final concentration should be 10 times less, which is 20 millimolar. And lo and behold, 20 millimolars here, which matches perfectly to the 20 millimolars over there. Okay, so now for the sodium acetate. Sodium acetate, it says sodium acetate 25 mils into a total of 500 mils. Now 25 is 1/20th of 500 mils. Okay, so this 1/20th is the amount it needs to be diluted by. So in other words, for the sodium acetate here, okay, this is 1 times, and everything else, and this is a bit awkward, this plus this together has to be 19 lots. Okay, so 1 lot, okay, or 1 part will be the sodium acetate, and 19 parts will be something else. Okay, so because it's 1/20th, we can say that dilution factor, the X factor, is a 20x dilution, which means this is a 20x buffer. Okay, so here we can say this buffer's concentration is 20x, which means it's 20 times more than it has to be in the final. Just like back in MOPS, we said this was a 10 times buffer, and therefore that was 10 times more concentrated than it had to be eventually. Okay, so here 20x buffer. Let's double check our calculations again. We started out with 100 millimolar, so this was our stock, and the stock was 20x. Now technically when we move to the final should become what we call 1x, okay, which is 20 times less than the initial starting concentration. 20 times less than 100 is actually 5 millimolar, and that's exactly what we saw over here. Okay, and lastly for our EDTA, we have 10 mils into 500 mils. Now 10 is 1/50th of 500 milliliters, okay, and therefore the dilution factor here, or the X factor, is 50x. Again, going back to the calculation, we have a starting, well, stock concentration of 50 millimolar, and we know that this concentration is a 50x concentration. Again, to go back to our final should be 1x, which means should be 1/50th of this. 1/50th of 50 is 1. Okay, 1 millimolar, which is actually equivalent to the answer that we worked out down here, which is 1 millimolar. So you can see that X factors, these dilution factors, are quite a powerful way of working through buffers, but they can get a bit tricky because of the understanding of a dilution factor actually is. Okay, so again, 1/50th means that, or 50 times buffer means that 1/50th, or 1 part, okay, is the actual stock, whereas the rest of the solution, so 49 out of the 50 parts, are something else, whereas 1 out of the 50 parts is this particular stock, which is EDTA.